IVM.
Do you often dream about leading a more creative life? Whether you wanted to be a painter, a dancer, a cricketer, or a photographer. Maybe you wanted to play games for a living. Growing up, financial responsibilities often take us away from our true passions. Now imagine if you could explore that creativity while still making sure that your family is financially secure. Find a way for the artist and the realist within us to coexist. Karo pure apne irade, apno se kiye sabhi waade. SBI Life apne liye, apno ke liye. To know more about our insurance plans with wealth creation, log on to www.sbilife.co.in. IRDAI registration number 111.
Hello and welcome to Simblified, a weekly podcast where four guys get together to try and make sense of the world around us, and that is our best intro ever.
Wait, has the episode started?
Okay. For those who, we just recorded this exact segment a while back, and somebody forgot to hit record, so we had to do the whole thing again. It genuinely felt like one of those, what's that game show, Colin Mockery wala?
Whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, it felt like one of those things where you have to watch sketch and then reenact it.
Yeah.
It felt like one of those.
My laugh right now made me feel very much like Sidhu, which is actually a pretty miserable feeling considering the current events, but sure.
There are so many current events right now.
Yes.
Especially featuring Sidhu.
In the interest of continuing that excellent opening, I think we must reintroduce ourselves to that one unfortunate new listener. And so Chuck, take it away. We can maybe do that with also describing, each of us has a unique current ailment going on. So I think we can do this introduction by also introducing that unique ailment that plagues us.
Absolutely. So I am Chuck, and my arm is currently in a sling owing to a barbell and misplaced confidence.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Srikeit. I am currently ailing from a city that hates me. Called Bangalore, which has consistently over the past 15 years, given me allergies every time I step foot in it. And I am therefore,
So this is not new.
No. Every time I come to Bangalore, I get allergies.
So is it, okay, so, we can empirically test this, right? So Is it only when you enter the city, like the border limits, or is it like when you fly in, or have you studied this on
only thing I have noticed is I start sneezing and it itches all over.
The point is does this happen only when you fly in, or suppose whatever district is in the outskirts of Bangalore, when you step over, when you walk, say.
Yeah.
Welcome to Simplified, the differential diagnosis episode.
Okay.
Not only state our ailments, but also.
But also in Srikeit's case, since he's in Karnataka, the ailments of the state.
Yeah. And allergies are nothing to sneeze at. Yes.
Or definitely not to sniffle at.
You're definitely in your ailment, Naren. Sorry.
I know. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So myself, Narendra Shenoy, list of ailments very long, episode very short, too short, but primarily I suffer from pain in the knee, pot belly, many things.
No. Right now, Naren. Right now. You sneezed before.
I coughed. Mostly sympathetically it's like yawning, right? So people yawn, and then other people yawn when they see other people yawning. So
I wonder how far you can stretch the sympathetic thing, go and bang your head against a wall and then see how many people will do it, kind of scenario.
This is also why,
it works in elections.
Oh man,
I am Tony. I currently don't have an ailment, except this is actually what my face looks like. So
Tony's ailment is he has a Yeti in his face.
And also his ailments are the three fellow co-hosts.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, it's been a while since we had a profundity on our podcast. That's also because, let's face it, there's a severe scarcity of it owing to the supply chain crisis. of WhatsApp forwards everywhere. However, so one of our old friends who goes by the Twitter handle at Yabasust, whatever that means, has put out, noting who all is speaking on podcasts these days and understanding who used to speak during GD 10-15 years ago.
What a brilliant analogy, I swear.
It's brilliant.
But the best part about this is all podcast hosts felt offended by this. Like, this is directed at
us. But it is particularly true of us, because I think every single one of us has been in a GD, haven't we?
I was terrible during GDs. How are you guys doing?
And MBA of Simplified listeners also agree to this fact.
I won by default because there are two alpha males in my GD and they killed each other basically. So,
okay.
So I was the rightful leftover.
No, that's not. I think AIB had made a sketch about GDs at one point of time. I think they had talked about this thing about those alpha males killing each other. And there is this one fellow who's trying to score points by constantly saying, "Oh, let that person speak. Oh, let that person speak." Yeah. So I was in a true spherical asshole space at the time when I gave my GD. So I was one of the alpha males, but there was no other person. So I ate everyone up.
Oh, wow.
Speaking of this, which do you think is the most moronic aspect of an MBA process, entire from admission to graduation? I think GD is the worst. Can you think of anything else?
I think certain questions that are standard, like for example, one of the most moronic questions in my particular process, like there was this professor who was probably alphabetically my name is down the order. So by the time she got to me, it was like a while since she was doing this, and she just by default was asking why / any question that could come to her mind, right? So at one point of time, she asked why MBA, and then I gave some answer, and then she asked why Pune. And I was like, because the college is here. What kind of answer do I give to that? Why Pune? I was like, I like the city. I've been here for the first time. Why do I want to go to Pune? So that possibly was the most moronic question during my MBA.
I want to say the most moronic thing to happen during an MBA is something called class participation points. So I'll tell you a few tales from Micah. By the way, guys, and this is off the record. Do you want to just turn this episode into talking about an impromptu discussion about our MBA?
Why is this off recording?
Just keep it on. This is what we do. This is our element.
No, let's do that. It's a great idea.
It's a great topic.
Go for it. Yeah. Wow. Why not?
We pivoted mid-episode.
This is amazing.
Now you're in peak Bengaluru, allergies and a pivot.
Oh man, excellent. Yeah.
For those of you who have chosen actual education and are not very clear about what class participation is, for some subjects there is a certain number of points allocated to how active you are in class and how often you give relevant points that aid the discussion, etc. Now, that theoretically sounds good, apart from the fact that classrooms are usually more than 50 students and the instructors couldn't care less. And it becomes difficult to keep a tab. We had one such professor, and Srikeit, you know who I'm talking about, but let's not take names. But let's not take names.
No names to be taken.
Who would be extremely assiduous, like, yes, that was a great point. And then he would take out the attendance sheet and mark against it.
And that would cause it was like putting a drop of blood in a shark tank.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the other thing that happened. As a result of this class participation points thing, it led to something, at least in Micah, where I went to do my MBA, it was called DCP. DCP stands for Desperate Class Participation. I'm sure every B school has some variant of this. How DCP works is everybody just feels the need to participate, to get their 5 seconds of fame and 3 marks on the paper. But what ends up happening, and this can be very interesting, and usually happens in around the 4th trimester when people give up on the ideal of an MBA, is at Micah, we used to have themed DCP. So we'd have a discussion beforehand and say, okay, this is the theme for this particular DCP. Right? So the theme so one of the themes I remember was alphabets.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So the DCP happened in such a way that the first person, it was an Antakshari dude. The first person started with a point starting with A, and then another person B. And then that exhausted after a while. And then people were trying all kinds of things. One person says, "Sir, suppose there's a company which has multiple problems, alpha, beta, gamma." So he went off and took alphabets to a different language itself. We had fun during these.
Yeah.
We
used to call this a CP challenge, actually. And
CP
thankfully,
challenge.
I think
Nice.
by the time we were in the 6th trimester, so WhatsApp was a thing, right? So this is the first thing that WhatsApp was used for. And we used to have stuff like, you have to include random phrases while making a serious point. Like you have to say Sheila ki Jawani, but it is in reference to the ethics class or something. Like that. This guy actually connected it to Sheila Dikshit in Delhi and so much corruption and all. But during her youth, she was different. Sheila ki Jawani was a different feel. Something else. So the challenge is to actually bring it into like normal conversation.
This actually links beautifully to the other B school specific game, which is in some circles known as PowerPoint karaoke, which is basically it is a challenge where students have to stand in front of the class and present a deck which they have no idea of what's coming in the next slide. All right, so they don't know.
Practical jokers.
Yeah, but this was done recreationally and not
not by default.
Not by default.
So it was. Yeah.
Explain.
So basically, this what they would do is like, I mean, the slides would not even. It's not like it's a deck that they just don't know. It is a deck that has no logical flow. It is a jumbled deck which has like randomly one slide full of data, and the next slide has a picture of a pumpkin. All right. So this was what the overall thing was, and I think we had some of the finest pieces of literature that was ever generated from these particular classes, where if anyone took the transcripts of it, it could be a book.
It could have been a 200 episode podcast. Thankfully, that doesn't exist.
PowerPoint karaoke could also be a tagline for Simblified.
So, who all would like to see the Simblified hosts do a PowerPoint karaoke? To write in and let us know, and we will see what we can do for the next
has the episode started?
Naren, were these games a thing in your time? I think we should just get our credentials on the table and which years we sort of graduated. So I did Micah from 2007 to 2009. Srikeit went to SIMC.
I was SIMC 2012 batch, and Tony?
Yeah, I was IMK 2012 batch.
And Naren.
1988 SP Jain.
Yes. This reminds me of, there was this movie called A Wednesday.
How many of you were born then?
1988, I was born.
Yeah,
I think we were born. But the thing is, this reminds me of, this is a movie called A Wednesday or something. And in that, there are all these, in the end, they get all these terrorists out, okay? And they are all like, while terrorists were talking about 1992, Mumbai, Garv hai. 1990, each is saying one number and everything. It's like, we are all also like 2012, SIMC, Garv hai. For Chuck, translation is, I'm proud.
No, I know this much, I know, okay.
You know what? It occurs to me that we might have made just as much sense if we had this podcast in 1988 also.
That's what we are timeless.
But Naren, you were saying stories of
games from
1988, 688 batch.
We had presentations using something called an overhead projector. So you had these little pieces of transparency paper, you wrote stuff on that, and then it went on to an overhead projector and wrote. So that was one. And then people would try to economize on the overhead projector by wiping it clean and reusing that thing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that was a thing. And so, if you've used it 3 or 4 times, it's pretty much illegible. Then when you know that your presentation sucks, you plant questions in the, so everyone asks you very pertinent questions, then you talk and you try to. So that kind of stuff. But I don't have very good, I really didn't. It's only now that I'm seeing basically what the benefits of management education are. And even that is like very iffy. Back in the day, I didn't see any relevance at all post hoc rationalization. So all the things, everyone would, present a case study, and rationalize like the ass was on fire. I mean, I never found anything logical, anything sensible. Absolutely the worst read bunch of people I've come across in my life. All that, yeah. Never read a book in their life, don't know anything, and just pontificating like hell.
And that ends the introduction to the hosts of Simplified.
Yeah.
Oh man,
So, but yeah, it was pretty bad.
It was a delightful rant, by the way.
Yeah, but this actually, I mean, what you said, Naren, continued to, at least in my case, also continued to be true for a solid majority. I mean, I'd say about 85% of the batch that was there. But what would always shock me was that there was this, I mean, the 15% were decent, but there was this 5% of the batch, about 5-7 people who are genuinely well-read, who have great academic backgrounds, who have in fact incredible work experience and all that stuff. And I'm just looking at, I'm like, in sabka kata hai. Ye sabka, they all bought some Kool-Aid. Some fellow gave them some bad advice. And they were like, this MBA is going to really add value. I'm going to I'm going to take my skills and elevate them to the next level. It was always it was a procession of 2 years. One of my friends was one of these people. It was a procession of 2 years of watching him be disappointed every day. Turn up to class and you're like, iske liye maine choda. This is why
I have to tell you how I got into MBA, right? So back in the day, in 1986, when I joined MBA, it wasn't a thing at all. I wanted a job in companies like L&T or Siemens or things like that. And I didn't get into any of those. They're very, very, very competitive. They had 10 openings and 10,000 applicants. So very difficult to get in. And my roommate at that time, he bought a form, an entrance exam form, and for a princely sum of 100 rupees. And he got into one of these guys. He got into Siemens. And so now he didn't need that. So he nobody in their right mind would get into Siemens and then want to do an MBA. So he sold me that form for 50 rupees. So he said
wow.
Yeah. So I bought that form and then I packed it into my bag. I came home and that was the last I thought about it. I unpacked the bag. My mom saw the form and she says, what is this? So I told her that this is an entrance exam form. It cost 100 rupees, but I got it for 50 rupees. So clever. So my mom's she said, how 50 rupees are astronomical sum? How can you not fill it and sort of, submit it?
That's fair. So
she hounded me. I went, and it so happens that one of my superpowers is cracking exams, entrance exams. I'm really good at cracking entrance. I cracked this one also. And before I knew what was happening, the world famous group discussion was happening right in front of us.
What is the topic? Do you remember the topic?
Yeah, it was something.
While you remember, this is why, Chuck, you say that form dictates content. So.
Wow, amazing. Yes, sorry, but topic.
So it was some random thing about international relations, something. Back in the day, it was US versus USSR, and two guys in the group happened to be on the opposite. One guy was a diehard communist and one guy was a diehard capitalist, and they were it started, and they were really alpha males, so they wouldn't let anyone else talk. And it was me and a bunch of other, so 2 or 3 guys were completely intimidated by the occasion. So they were looking like dying ducks at that time. And these 2 alpha males were basically just butting heads, and then they started abusing each other.
Oh shit!
So it started, ad hominem and all that stuff happened. Though this guy called it the moderator. That's what they call them, moderator. So the moderator said he stopped it. He wound up the group discussion, and I said, "Cool." I mean, that was it. I went back and they were going to put the results later in the day or something, and I find myself nominated out of that. Absolutely, for absolutely no reason. Yeah, rightful leftover, I call them. Yeah.
Well done by furthering the non-aligned movement.
Yeah, you were truly the centrist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well done.
So that's how I got into the. And then there was an interview, and
didn't they? Yeah, I mean, didn't they ask you during the interview? They always ask, no, why MBA?
Why MBA?
So they asked the guy who was taking the interview was also a mechanical engineer, and he asked me a lot of mechanical engineering questions. I was all full out of fresh out of mechanical engineering. So I was able to answer a good many of them. So they're very impressed.
So on the basis of you knowing Bernoulli's theorem, you got into a B school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh
In
my
fact,
God.
Bernoulli's theorem was one of the things I got asked.
I mean,
Oh,
it always
wow.
is. It always is. I don't think that.
It's a standard, yeah.
Now we have only Bernoulli's theorem to all discourse.
But do either of you guys remember any of your GD topics?
So in MICA, they don't do, because MICA is slightly hipster, they don't do a group discussion. They do something called a group exercise.
Yeah.
So they give everybody, at least during my time, they used to give people sort of common task and you all have to come out with a solution together. So these days it's taken to another level where they're given arts and crafts paper and they need to draw posters and things like that. So MICA always takes it to another level like that. It's quite fun actually. Yeah. So I remember we had a very peaceful discussion. I think before the GD or GE, as they call it, started itself, we all decided beforehand, listen, let's all be civil. If there is any fighting, then nobody's going to get selected. Let's all be calm so that at least somebody stands a chance. I got lucky that way. I didn't make it through MICA on my first try. I was very keen on getting through to the place because I somehow developed this fascination for advertising sometime halfway through my engineering. So I was very keen on getting through, especially to MICA. That made things very easy for me from a CAT prep point of view because everyone else was gunning for the 98, 99%. I was like, screw it, like 98, 95 is just good enough for me. So it was very liberating. Like we'd be at a coaching center and they'd be teaching some very complex trigonometric concept. And you could see all these guys who are dreaming of getting into IIMs and all. Damn, if you're going to get into IIMs, we need to crack them. I don't know. Screw it. I know enough from the others to get 95. It was very liberating for me that way. But I didn't get through on my first try. So that was what happened in the GE. I forget what exactly the challenge was, but I do believe a village was involved at some point. Village committee or something. Yeah.
What about you, Tony?
I actually don't remember my GD topic
at all. But you had a proper GD.
Yeah, of course. But my interview thing was funny because I went in there and these guys are like, "Oh, you did metallurgical engineering and then you worked for 2 years in software. Now you want to do MBA. What's wrong with you?" And then the other prof is like, he never sticks to what he does. And I was like, okay, how are you so perceptive, man? So it was an interesting experience. But GD, I don't really know.
How did you get yourself out of that hole?
You always have the standard why MBA question prepared.
Analytical skills.
However, whatever the first question is, your first answer has to be why MBA. So
that's true.
Yeah. This was actually, for me, it was actually a very weird. So from a GD perspective, I honestly, I too don't remember the exact topic that was there, but it was something about, I was vocal about whatever, but I think one thing that kind of there was this other dude in the group, in my own GD group, I think it was something about India, and he made one statement that was just patently ridiculous, something either crazy sexist or just absolutely crazy in some way. And it was so bad that he was sitting on the opposite side of the table and he was arguing with me. So because he made that crazy statement, everybody else went silent. So the moderator, I think, perceived that I was opposition to him. He made that crazy statement and everybody else seemed to support him or something. So they pretty much sank the whole other group except for me. So it was one arbitrary thing. And then my interview with the why Pune question happened. But largely, from my perspective, it was actually a bit of a cakewalk because like you, Chuck, I had a very clear idea of getting into advertising, and I was one of the few people who had actually done an internship in advertising before in my undergrad. So I could go and say that I've interned with Ogilvy, and they were all oh my God, this guy is whatever. Yeah. So that itself made a huge this thing, and that part was easy. The difficult part was actually for me the test itself. So I too wanted to get into MICA, but I was in the glitch cat year. The cat was transitioned to computers. So that because of that, when I was there, all the DI questions, data interpretation questions, were all the graphs for all of them. They were all those boxes with the small X on the top, no image found. So you can't even look at the image. Graph is not there only to answer it. So I was just what do I answer to this? And then the moderator comes and says, see, you can do one thing. You can leave this test right now and you can say the test is glitched or whatever. and you may get a chance to sit at it again, or otherwise you complete the test and don't raise a protest. I'm like, what kind of weird choice is this? And she said, you may get a chance. And I was like, I had finished. See, I already knew that I needed to score well on verbal, and verbal sailed off beautifully. So I was like, yeah, my verbal went very well. So final result, CAT results came, and that was like, I got 99.6 percentile in verbal, some 70 percentile in quant, and like some 30 percentile in DI. So I like fully screwed it up because I didn't answer anything there. So at the end of it, but MICA anyway had its own MICAT thing, which I was allowed to sit for, which also for some reason I didn't get through. So then when MICA didn't happen, Snap was a piece of cake. I was hungover and like it was so popular that I went there and like they're asking synonyms of words with multiple choice. And I'm like, yeah, this is just like, it's like a 10 standard test.
Oh, they were asking for the symbiosis between words, basically. But okay, so I think we might have just bored our listeners by talking about our personal experiences. Sorry, but so now that all of us are older, wiser, and have reaped the benefits of a world-class MBA education. Told you to mute yourself when you have a cough, no? But in all seriousness, how would we... Okay, suppose the four of us were tasked to redo the MBA admissions process. First, we wouldn't laugh. And two, how would we go about doing it? Like, what do you think we know what the skills needed, not just for an MBA, but to work in business these days is. So how do you think we could go about doing it? Was that too heady a question?
Yeah. I have no clue. I'm happy to admit that I have absolutely no clue what makes a good manager. I have seen far too many completely unlettered and untutored people doing excellent business decisions, and too many really qualified MBAs doing stupid ones. So
what would it take, Naren, to get the former into a B school? Where they could hopefully get
it's
better.
Very difficult because unless so many people, one or two people I know who've done really well in business, who started very humbly and then built big companies, have basically stumbled from failure to failure and somehow managed to stay on their feet. Oftentimes, it takes a blind belief in your own ability, not by yourself, but by other people. So somebody has to fund you, somebody has to urge you on, somebody has to support you and things like that. So there is that part, which is luck. And sometimes it's people finding their niche. So some people are really good maybe at selling stuff, and all their life they're just involved in manufacturing it, and then they somehow stumbled into the selling field and they do well. And sometimes it's the other way around.
Do you think, Naren, it's there? So like one criticism that I've often heard about the MBA selection process in general is that they try to check off a box rather than thinking about what value this person could possibly add to the classroom or what value an MBA education could have for this person. Do you think the answer is somewhere over there? Because it looks like the traditional MBA selection process is more about saying, okay, does this guy fit in with these kind of criteria? Whereas somebody who's actually may not be from the most sophisticated background, but has gone through 5 failures in life would arguably be a better choice for classroom in some sense and be a better and then figure out if in the class itself how they could have been a better manager or something like that. Does that make sense?
I think what you're broadly pointing to and what I was a real beneficiary of is 2 things. One is in mine was the year when IMK actually took really great decision, in my opinion, to not just rely on CAT scores, but also sort of look at other things with sort of actually a stated aim to increase the diversity of the batch, right? So they basically made sure that at least 30% of the class was women, right? And I think, when you talk about the admissions and someone with 5 life failures or whatever, essentially you're talking about a diversity perspective, right? So that was great because I remember that we were watching Kill Bill all together, friends, and basically lots of us are focused on the insane action that's going on. And there was a woman friend of mine who suddenly said, hey, isn't her skirt really cute? To which another sort of woman agreed. And then we all suddenly took notice of the fact that there was a cool skirt in this particular thing, right? Which would never have happened in, let's say, an engineering college or whatever. Combined with that, but what exists across B schools, I think, is the first time it is that you're treated as adults. And you're basically put in charge of the destiny of your placement through PlaceCom, or there is a cultural committee which is to raise its own funds to conduct a festival and stuff like that. So I came out at the perfect time, because after that, obviously, this when you put in diversity in terms of gender, what eventually happens is that they end up shutting down or making, female and male hostels, and then putting a Chinese wall in between, and basically losing the original point why you set it up anyway. But yeah, I think diversity is something that should definitely be targeted in B school admissions.
Yeah, I agree. So just a disclaimer. So I have actually been fortunate to be on the MICA panel itself a few times. And I've been completely blown away by the admission criteria in some sense. MICA is an institute that prides itself on diversity, and I got to see that firsthand myself. Like, they were always very clear about, we are selecting and not rejecting. We want to see how each person can possibly add value to the batch and the discussion, rather than fitting a few criteria. Like, for example, I remember during the first year when I did it, we were all interviewing somebody, this one alumni, one current faculty, and one, I think, an industry expert. And I was blown away by one of the candidates that I spoke to. I'm like, oh, this guy is a sure shoe in. He fits all the MBA material. And all the reasons for which I wanted to select this guy, the professor next to me said, no, he won't fit into this because he's a perfect MBA material, meaning that he's going to choose some other typical MBA school in any case, because he's looking for a general MBA. He doesn't need what we offer. Neither will we be able to offer what he is looking for. And that was fascinating. Like, they really kept an eye out for people who did not speak English very well, or had distinct failures in their life, which I thought was pretty interesting and just made me gain a little more respect for my alma mater.
The thing is, right now, I don't know how the processes have evolved right now, and I've not been part of a process since my last one a decade ago. But what always blew me away was, I've done this a lot with like current interns. When I talk to, like, when I'm trying to interview interns, I'm like, send samples of work that you're most proud of, right? And the thing is, there they try to make you fit into a mold of asking you a certain type of question, or asking you to do a certain type of exercise, which may or may not be your forte. Like, for example, I was just thinking, if I got to the group discussion or group exercise phase of MICA, and somewhere there was an arts and craft kind of task, I would have just like imploded right there. Right. And I was like, dude, this is like, and tomorrow if they had and similarly, if they had like an elocution kind of task, some other candidate may implode right there. So individually, it would be a more cumbersome process. It would be so interesting if they were to actually ask the candidates, how do you want to tell us that you are a good candidate for this particular course? And how can you express it in your way, medium that you're most comfortable in? Like, whether you want to do it as an assignment, whether you want to do it as a speech, you want to take part in a discussion, then we'll get all the students who want to take part in a discussion together and then have that discussion. Then what that does is, like, it would really give you a perspective. Like, it allows the student to really put their best foot forward, right? It would really allow them to show their best facet rather than be forced to participate in a small window of performance where they may not be able to do their thing.
Yeah, and speaking of performance, there's this B school form that most schools inevitably ask for, which have the same standard questions. It'll have an SOP, which have strengths, weakness, tell us something about yourself, which usually becomes extremely templatized after a point. Like, the answers, like, very often when I was scanning through those forms, you had to like look for whether this looked like it was copied off the internet, or that same story will be there. No, for MICA and SIMC, it will be, I was growing up, so I won some elocution contest as a kid. I knew I was creative. From there, my love for brands, advertising, whatever, this college will help me achieve my dreams, goals, whatever.
Dude, the number of times, even in advertising interviews, you have heard that I have always been the person who is, instead of watching the shows, will watch the ads. I've heard this line at least like 10 times. So I'm like, that is not unique.
This reminds me of an Ogden Nash poem. Beneath this stone is John Brown stored. He watched the ads and not the road.
Very nice. How long have you been hoarding that one? But actually, I sort of disagree. I don't think there's an issue with like the people that are selected into B school, apart from obviously the privilege that shines through, which I would say we are all beneficiaries of. So a true sort of admission would be statistically representative of the population in most cases, right? Which I think is tough to achieve, but the more drive there is towards diversity, it's fine. But also you're getting people into a B school, right? The idea is that in 2 years, you can sort of teach them something that they already don't know and can develop into sort of well-rounded managers as opposed to subject matter experts. So I think in my view, it is unfair to sort of judge B school for its curriculum or way courses are taught, or the sheer fact that you don't really need to go through 40 to 48 courses over a 2-year period, right? So I think the softer elements in terms of what that helps you do, how you learn how to prioritize, like I mentioned, you're an adult on campus for the first time. Do you just stick to books, or what do you do when you're out there? How do you prioritize your time? How do you do a basic presentation? How do you work in a group? All of that actually adds a lot.
I'd say, in fact, that Tony, I'd go a step further and say actually that's more important. I personally think that I learned more outside the classroom rather than in the classroom. I think that's true for a lot of us. So that means, in some sense, all the subjects and all that are just setups for the actual education.
which makes me think that if you were to reimagine if you're actually doing that reimagining, and you were to start with the premise that 90% of the classes are garbage, then what would you really do? Like, I would actually, what I think is one of the most useful exercises that we used to have was like the wargaming that we used to do. Like the wargaming exercise. I would like legit make wargaming like a regular course where you actually, over a course of a year, you kind of put people through like different scenarios of a war game and like kind of get them to get that experience. And that seems like the most practical, realistic approach of kind of doing things where you'll at least get them tested in different ways, right? And I mean, because right now MBAs, right now the biggest benefit you're getting is like you were basically trapped on a campus for 2 years with future peers, and that is the network that you built out of the Stockholm syndrome that you had with your fellow peers is what you're kind of like using as in your career. So that's
the point is that what you're taking out of the MBA curriculum is actually the literal sort of example of you are watching something for the ads, not the actual thing. So
oh wow, that's brilliant.
So if you were to reimagine, it would be about creating situations where it's not the end outcome that's necessary as much as the process in some sense, right? I remember, for example, one of our retail classes, retail management or something like that, retail marketing or something like that, we actually had to create little retail stores of our own. And that was pretty interesting. We had to set up things on campus. But apart from the marketing side of it, which everyone aced how to create a campaign for their store and all that. But what is revelatory to a lot of us was things like, where are we going to set this thing up? And, where are we going to get all the supplies from? What is customer interaction inside the store going to be like? And that opened up our eyes like crazy. At least for me, it did.
And what also kind of came across was like, the classic Indian approach is that you get evaluated against a textbook, and it's very easy to game results in that favor, right? Like as a person who's trying to evaluate to that particular end. But like the specific, like the examples that you were talking about, we had a particular war game scenario where it was basically a client, like 5 agencies pitching to a client, right? And that particular thing was, at the end of the day, based on the merit of the clients were also a bunch of students who were going to get evaluated on the basis of the reasons they gave for selecting the agency that they did. So the thing was, everybody was evaluating each other because their own survival was dependent on it. And that was the fairest. Like, we won that particular exercise, and I felt like elated because I was like, this is the first meritorious thing I seem to have gotten over here, like truly meritorious. Like, it was like among my peers, they were recognizing that what you did was good, right? So that kind of evaluation system really would and kind of creating systems of that kind of evaluation also would really help the entire process along.
Do you think that in its current format, that MBA doesn't teach students how messed up the world actually is, or how business actually is? Do you feel like that part is underemphasized?
I don't think that's the intent of the course, right? So what Srikeit described, for instance, happens in all of your B school competitions, right? Or the ones that companies sort of do, etc. But I don't think it's the intent for B school to, even from a sort of curriculum perspective, right, to teach you the realities. It's to sort of teach you maybe theories and give you sort of frameworks which you're free to reject or use it as a shortcut to then evaluate management decisions, right? So I think, to me, although I never figured it out then, but like having theories followed up with case studies is actually a very robust model from a pedagogy perspective. But I don't know if people figure it out then or later.
For all that I heap score on the MBA education, what I like is that because of the case study method and because of everything, when let us say you enter a company which has been in existence for a few decades, and it's stable business, it has products, it sells itself. You have to make sure you place a few ads. Your marketing function is basically a little bit of advertising, a little bit of hobnobbing with distributors, making sure you get 5% extra every year. And then you get a young guy or a young bunch of people who think about radically new ways of remodeling, and it forces everyone to think. So 9 times out of 10, the radical new ideas are going to be rubbish, but 1 time in 10, they're probably going to be revolutionary. So, and people ignore them at their own peril. So, you see so many good, stable companies declining and finally going into extinction because of complacence. So I think part of the new MBAs or an MBA's brief is to shake things up, and it helps that you have young, enthusiastic, wannabe sort of MDs too. That's a good part of the case study thing. Yeah.
Do you think then that, let's take the events of the last couple of years. So I actually wish there was somebody over here who did, the most recent MBA is Tony, right? As in both Tony and Srikeit from exactly a decade ago. Do any of you know if the events of the last 2 years, for instance, you can do an entire MBA course on just the last 2 years from a marketing perspective, financial perspective, crisis management, all that. Now I don't expect MBA in that sense to gear people up for something like this, but do you think a lot of this would have made it to an MBA classroom? Do you think the batch of 2023, for instance, will a big part of their education also be about how companies transform themselves overnight? And not just that, but all the other changes that are happening, like a crypto, for instance, what that means for the world of finance or whatever it is.
I feel the one thing that's working in the favor of the MBA, and it was there a decade ago as well, and more also, is the real rise of a desire to get industry specialists in.
Yeah.
And I feel, yes, industry experts bring in the industry point of view and all that. And I take Tony's point on we there is a lot of pedagogy also involved, but what the industry specialist also brings is recency and currentness in the content. Chuck, you and I have been in the process of teaching a bunch of people and developing some content in that space. And I was just evaluating that. And the one thing that actually the students take away a lot from these sessions is that I still remember being infuriated when I was doing my MBA in 2011 at one point, seeing my prof slides and finding out that slide and seeing the watermark over there and finding out that slide is made in 2003. Right. Yeah. And I'm these profs are just regurgitating the same thing year on year and just continuing with that. And at the very minimum, removing at the most removing just stuff that is truly outdated. Yeah. That's the max they will do. Yeah. But what we do with industry experts is because they are dealing with situations on a day-to-day basis. I don't think any marketing expert or any advertising expert would be able to take a lecture at least next year without truly addressing how to do marketing in the COVID era to some extent.
So this brings me to an interesting point. I had a feeling that you would say that. And okay, so here's an experience that I had at Micah, which I'm thinking is going to be the same for you and perhaps for Tony as well. Can't say for Naren. Is that when I look back now, and it's been a good 15 years, wow, since I graduated, many of the classes or lessons that I still remember, right, as being the most memorable were all taken by guest faculty. And that could be because of the novelty of the session, or could just be because of the recency thing, like you said, or it could be because, hey, this is a topic that was just, interesting and finished in 2 sessions rather than being dragged on for 20 or 30 or something like that. In a situation like that, what is the role of a B school really? Is a B school sort of acts as a curator of sorts, right? Getting together the best speakers or something like that. So what then just does differentiate one from the other? In the case of a SIMC or a MICA, it becomes slightly simpler because of the focus on the education itself. But what about other B schools? Then what's going to differentiate, say, an IMK from an IMB or something else when they are all essentially offering the same course, but let's say with one prettier campus than the other? I don't know. It's just a random thought that I had.
No, I think anyway, the sort of hierarchy of IIMs have been, or B schools have been predefined by the kind of packages that people get, right? In by and large, except for, let's say, MICA or something like that. But basically, the pecking order is already defined by external factors. I don't think that people even consider a campus as a differentiator when you take up a role. Which is why each sort of B school needs to find its sort of purpose in some sense. Right? Which, it'll vary, but I think IMK has sort of gone from, increasing that diversity agenda, right? So they also launched like a liberal arts plus MBA kind of course. And are looking at in terms of diversity beyond just gender, right? So it depends on, which also led to the fact that sort of more companies started coming in because of this differentiated factor. And then it got reinforced because obviously diversity helps in even companies, right? So they found out that it actually makes sense to come to this campus because you will get probably a diverse kind of batch.
That's pretty interesting. So that's one way to differentiate, I guess.
Yeah. So the one point that I feel is I was just looking at it like, just going back to the core of the question that you asked, which was about the whole, that the guest faculty lectures are the best and the MBA colleges are the curators. I almost feel that the way MBAs are structured right now are for those guest faculties, but except for the fact that they still have to exist within this Indian education system, right? And this Indian education system needs to deliver the meat and potatoes, all right? Without the meat and potatoes, there is no degree or any kind of accredited whatever that you can get, right? So to truly and like Tony was saying, there are some that are now migrating to that liberal arts plus MBA kind of angle of things where it's or something like a Flame University, what Flame is trying to do, or whatever, what that kind of stuff. But those are all niche experiments. For any kind of mainstream college, they will have to have a guy who's called professor and who has truly earned the title of professor by like education to sit and deliver that meat and potatoes lectures, and you truly have to wait for, like, those are the meat and potatoes, so that's the veggies that you have to eat, and then you have to wait for the pudding later, right? So the pudding and the stuff that you will actually remember and be memorable will all come later along with that whole thing. But you have to pass those exams so that you can get that degree, so that you can, and again, you could just have, if a experiment of a college started, which they just decided to get a whole bunch of guest lecturers in and just take a bunch of sessions,
then it's basically a Z-Melt conference, no?
It's a Z-Melt conference, and what that does is, at the end of the day, nobody's going to give you a job based on a Z-Melt conference certificate. So that's the other thing. So that's what I get from this, that it's the MBA colleges trying to exist in an Indian education system,
or any education system. I think what you said right now doesn't just make sense for India. I think it's something that would make sense for any other geography as well. You need to go through the certain academic rigor and all that, and then have the once the spikes, as it were, once in
okay,
a while.
guys, tell me which is the most pointless subject you had in the, well, you think
pointless subject we had. We did have a bunch of faculty that tried very hard to teach a bunch of Micans how to do finance, and which was okay. The attempt was there, but I don't think the way it. Okay, I mean, none of us at the end of the day figured out how to use a P&L sheet, so I think it might have been contextualized better. I don't know. That's a wrong answer to your question.
Yeah.
No, because I wouldn't say that was useless as much as you were not capable, as a batch of students.
Exactly.
Pointless. Yeah. So we had a subject called organizational behavior.
I had a feeling you might have said that.
So I loved OB1.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was completely pointless because we had people who just came and pontificated and just walked off and really didn't understand because I was 22 years old. I had no clue what the hell an organization was. So, right? And here there are people who are talking very grandiloquently about how to, I don't know, back in the day it was searching for excellence and excellence is hiding under a chair. You catch the excellence, bring it out, and that kind of shit. And that was strategy. That was the second stupid thing. The organizational behavior was the stupidest one. I think it was completely rubbish. There was Maslow's hierarchy in
that. Yes.
Because like pretty much 97% of what people understood, the rest of it was just rubbish.
My guess is a lot of us would have gained respect for things like organizational behavior into our careers rather than in class.
I agree. So
here's one suggestion I have for MBA in general. I think there are some things that you can't teach in classrooms and will become apparent only later. I think when every student graduates, they should get like an envelope or something that says open in 10 years time. And then all those things will start making sense a little later. Maybe one way of thinking about an MBA, and this might be a sort of radical way of thinking about it. I don't think the education should stop at 2 years. Now think about a B school where every year you have to attend 3 days of updates, or
what you are describing, Chuck, is a BBA MBA.
Is a
BBA MBA.
No. BBA MBA is still going to happen for a certain time frame, right? For 4 years, 5 years, or whatever. I'm saying like even now. I should be taking classes from Micah where you have some experts on, say, blockchain or something like that coming and updating my knowledge. Now, maybe I pay a lump sum for that in the beginning, or maybe I pay a subscription year on year. I think something like that might be interesting.
Yeah, you're basically suggesting a rundle.
Not a rundle as much as a subscription in some sense. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, fair point. But I take that aspect of it. But then again, what I won't trust a B school to do is deliver relevant information to me over the years. Once I'm working for say 10 years, I honestly at this point, at least from my own B school, I don't trust a curriculum they will set for me. Any kind of curriculum. Yeah. I need to be able to pick and choose, say that you tell me which prof is going to teach it. I want the credentials of that prof. Yeah. Tell me what is the specific course. And I will make my time for it.
In Bombay, there is a street this thing which says that I don't want, it sounds very rude in Hindi, but the English translation is don't teach your father to have sex. That is the thing. So this is what is going to happen. If 10 years later, some guy is going to try and teach you anything about management, good luck with that.
Somehow I have a feeling. I somehow have a feeling that inadvertently we might have given a few edtechs some ideas. Over here. Yeah. I'm just thinking, if there's somebody from Bangalore,
I want a royalty.
Yeah.
But what about raising the average age of MBA admission? If you're saying
good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
Making work experience mandatory. Yeah.
Absolutely pointless taking the fresh grads. Okay. What favorite subjects?
Wait 1 second. I don't think Tony said what is
No, I think we can move on.
Okay, go ahead. Favorite subject. Go for it.
I hate to say this, Naren, but mine actually was strategy. We had a very good prof who came and totally changed the way. Yeah, it totally changed the way that me and a couple of others who were very keen on this sort of thing looked at not just marketing but business in general. A very close second would be a subject called account planning, which basically is what Srikeit and I were doing in agencies for a while. And what made it interesting was the way it was conducted. So we had to, the theory part of the course was like 2 hours. And after that, you said, okay, you buggers now go out and actually do something. So for an entire week, we would be going out, interviewing people, actually making creatives, actually shooting ads and stuff like that. And just that entire experience was...
and just to give a shout, and just to give a shout out, I don't know, Chuck, if it was for you, but fellow podcaster on the IBM network, a traveling professor.
Not for us. Not for us.
Not for us. Yeah, but he took an account planning module for us as during my time in SIT.
That's Siddharth Deshmukh, the traveling professor, who incidentally I have been on the interview panel with, as in like he's been a co-interview with me. So
fascinating.
Yeah, he's a pretty good guy.
For me, it would be definitely, see, that's what, right? The favorite subjects are usually revolving around the professor. Yeah. And for me, it was this incredible professor called Ashish Kulkarni, who taught economics. He was at Gokhale Institute of Economics and he used to teach over there. And he came and took economics for us. And I submitted one of my best assignments ever. Is he was teaching us about GST. And at that time, he was teaching us what the goods and services tax is about. And he said his assignment was very simple. He said, see, I only want you guys to do this. I have not taught you GST right now out of any textbook. I want you to take whatever you have understood, the way you have understood it, and write it in your own original way and submit it to me in 200 words. And the submission I gave was, there was no Wikipedia article on GST, so I wrote that article.
Wow.
And I submitted the Wikipedia article as my submission.
I somehow think the favorite subject or memory or whatever also depends on the time that it comes in during your MBA education. Like, for example, I think it was in the 5th or 6th trimester that we had a actual finance subject, something like economics, incidentally. Yeah, I think something like economics or econometrics or something of that sort. Because by then, me and a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, Rahul, we were both fed up with any prof who came and said, all right, what is a brand? We had enough of stuff like that. And then this guy came in and spoke non-FAF for the first time, like a guy who was actually talking about company valuations. And both of us were like with a jaw drop. So that's what market capitalization means. Holy shit, that's what it means. And we were completely blown away. That became one of our favorite subjects, our favorite experiences, at least from that.
What was the subject?
I forget, but it's something like economics, something related to the stock market. I remember that him talking a lot about market caps and things like that. Perhaps it was stock valuations or something like that. Tony?
Yeah, my favorites were actually, I think, thinking back, probably then I enjoyed more the marketing ones, but thinking back, it's actually microeconomics and OB1.
Amazing. All of us are like finance and OB guys.
Yeah, because OB1 was actually sort of the introduction to the behavioral part of behavioral economics, right? All of the decision biases.
He was truly the Obi-Wan Kenobi of your the mentor of your journey into behavioral economics. Go on. So Naren, for you,
it was statistics, hands down statistics.
Wow,
it was the first time.
Bunch of nerds here.
It was. So we had I forget who the teacher was, but he was good at connecting statistics with real life problems. And so before that, I don't remember we must have had statistics in engineering, but never really, you do it in things like statistical thermodynamics. Now it's very different. I mean, you study all the equations and all the theorems and everything, but you never connect it with real life situations. That was amazing. I mean, that gave me, like, I loved that subject. That was one. And microeconomics, economics in general.
No?
Yeah, it was fascinating. Just reading stuff about, stuff about economics was very interesting.
Yeah.
So two things.
Fascinating.
It seems like, I mean, basically from this perspective, it seems like we were all, I mean, any part of actually things where we actually ended up learning rather than just reinforcing what we already knew was where the best subjects actually came out.
No, right? But a point is taken that it's a big function of the professor. So we had one professor who became very senior in HDFC and HDFC Bank. And he taught us something called financial management, which was very similar to what Chuck was saying. Valuing companies, stocks, shares, how do you value assets, how do you value things, what do you do with, and it was not just it's just not finding the net present value of a income stream or something like that. It was like, trying to account for a lot of intangibles and things like that. It was fascinating. And he would talk about, because he was a senior guy even then, he would talk about a lot of real life sort of situations. And it opened, it was just because of the professor. He was like, really someone you could look up to. So yeah.
Well, here's to the good professors who made whatever education worth it.
Yeah.
It's been a fairly long discussion on something that we had no intention of recording, which I think is a hallmark.
This is truly historic that we decided on the topic while inside the episode.
No, that's what. And it's meta in many ways, because we are talking about an MBA, and this is what we were in some sense trained to do. Any parting thoughts, like any other aspects, questions?
I want to ask one final question though. Like at this point, and we can try and keep it as brief as possible, is would you recommend anyone to do an MBA at this point of your career, at this point of your life?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think I would. Yeah, I think I would.
So would I. I mean, for all that I keep, disparaging MBA as a tribe, there is a lot of value in that education, and it's kind of, those skills are required in every walk of life.
I am probably the only one who disagrees. I at this point, I don't see, because I for some reason I've gotten a lot of respect for hard skills. And I feel like if anybody, especially if someone's done who has had my background, who has a soft skills undergraduate background, but if someone comes from a hard skill undergraduate background and has a bent for it, I would actually encourage them to kind of like take that forward, because I see the future to be a place where, I mean, while FAF will be useful, the world would be better with less of it.
Yeah, fair enough. So what I would add as a caveat, and maybe this acts as a nice centrist bridge between the two factions over here, is I would say MBA, as long as whoever wants to do it sees the role of it in their lives in some sense, not to necessarily escape from something. Like, I think we've all been through that phase of, I don't like my software job and everybody else seems to be doing an MBA, so I want to jump to it. As long as it's not that, and as long as, like, if for somebody, for example, Srikeit, somebody who is doing hard skills but is unable to rise beyond a certain point in the then yes, an MBA definitely makes sense. I guess that is my centrist view. That was a surprising episode.
That's surprisingly. No, it was surprisingly. What do we say? Profound from you, Chuck. Which is less expected.
And it all started from a random profundity, which we were just supposed to leave before talking about something. else.
This is what that famous friend of us does.
This is what the famous friend of us does. Yes.
Yes. So, Naren, you want to take us out?
Yeah. So stay safe, stay managing, and stay simplified.
Stay managing.
Stay managing.
Stay man-aging.
That is also true.
Signing off with four old men with ailments.
Bye.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Filter Coffee Podcast, Karthik speaks to three independent filmmakers, Guneet Monga, Sophia Paul, and Ashwin Iyer Tiwari. They dive into a conversation that is full of anecdotes, different visions, and films. Our new show, Voices for Water, hosted by Karthik Nagarajan, discusses India's Great Water Challenge. It examines the current state of availability of water in India and how we as citizens can do our bit to tackle this challenge. On the Paisa Vesta podcast, Anupam is joined by Binal Gandhi and Sonira Sangvi, co-authors of Piggy Bank to Portfolio, How to Raise Financially Smart Kids. They talk about the reason behind writing this book and their research findings with more than 500 parents. On the Edges and Sledges Cricket podcast, Ashwin and DJ talk about the untimely demise of cricket legend Shane Warne. They also cover the India vs Sri Lanka series. On the Life Manifesto, Zarina highlights things she wishes that we were taught when we were younger, especially for women. And on All Things Policy, Megha talks to Arjun to discuss the recent tests conducted by the DRDO and how militaries around the world are embracing quantum. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you enjoyed this show or any of our shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth really does help us. And also, please, a rating if you could. That is also extremely helpful to us. And remember, we're also on YouTube. You can check out ivmpodcast.com/YouTube to get a list of the different channels that we operate on YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, Bank of Baroda, India Water Portal, and Max Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Do you wonder why China does the things that it does? Or want to know how we could improve online privacy? Or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy. If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.